Angela Davis, thank you so much for joining me on Upfront.
Thank you, Mark.
In the midst of Israel's relentless attacks on Gaza, numerous black activists in the U.S. have expressed their solidarity with Palestinians, and they've called once again for an end to the occupation. Back in 2020 in Gaza City, in the midst of Black Lives Matter protests, a Palestinian artist painted a large mural of George Floyd, the African-American man, of course, who had recently been murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis. These two places are more than 6,000 miles away from each other, yet Palestinians and Black Americans have found a common cause with each other's struggles. How does a moment like that, how do these moments come to be?
Well, Mark, for about as long as my political memory goes back, I think the causes of Palestine and Black liberation have been intertwined. And I just can't imagine that those of us who call ourselves scholar activists, I can't imagine not calling for justice for Palestine. I can't imagine the whole agenda of social justice in the world not including Palestine. In this respect, I think Black people in the U.S. and throughout the region of the West of this hemisphere should feel a very special tie to Palestinians. Of course, there is a long history, but I think back to June Jordan, the incredible poet, when very few people were talking about the importance of supporting Palestine. June was upfront, arguing that it was not only necessary to support people in Palestine, but to recognize that Palestine itself is a kind of moral litmus test for the world.
Yeah.
Of course, Nelson Mandela said that South Africa would not be free until Palestine is free. So Palestine occupies a very central place in the political imagination of the last 50, 75 years.
A lot of people, when they hear the word solidarity, they think sameness. But the conditions between Black folk and Palestinians, the conditions are different in certain ways. How much of the solidarity movement hinges on us having the exact same oppressive conditions, and how much of it is about the broader systems of power that put us where we are? How do we, because I think a lot of people say, well, my life isn't like a Palestinian, and the Palestinian says, well, I don't have to deal with those things over there. How do you tease that out?
Those who assume that they live in a very small, insulated space in the world are just not recognizing conditions as they are today. We do not live in silos. We do not have our little bubbles in which we get to choose what affects us as individuals. I think that what is really exciting about this last period, as much suffering as we have witnessed and experienced, is that we've seen movements against racism expand. We would not have imagined so many people identifying with these anti-racist efforts. And now, of course, we're seeing, we're seeing those who are reacting against it. Those who don't want to see us move forward in our understanding of the way in which racism in the U.S. is very much connected to apartheid in South Africa, which is very much connected to apartheid in Israel. Yeah. This is a question that can't be answered abstractly. I think it's a question that has to play out in the course of the practice of solidarity.
One of the things that's come up in that practice of solidarity is conversations about the role of policing as well. For years, there have been exchange programs that bring together police, ICE, border control, FBI, all from the United States, along with soldiers, police, and border agents from Israel to share tactics on quote-unquote counterterrorism. Both the U.S. and Israel have been accused of repressive policing, of racial profiling, and they continue to sort of deepen their ties toward developing a kind of shared security model. When you see those relationships, what can we learn from that?
Well, those relationships that link the militarization of the police in the U.S. and other countries to the leadership of Israel, the IDF, and which is trained police forces all over the country. It becomes clear, I think, that all these issues are intertwined. Let's remember that Cop City is developing in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and precisely at a time when the police were on the defensive as a consequence of the struggles that were catalyzed by the lynching of George Floyd. The police were on a defensive for a little while, but now it appears as if they're trying to not only regain the position they had before, but move forward. And not only
I mean, I was just thinking, it's not just governments either, right? I mean, private entities are also involved in these kinds of exchanges. For example, we've seen the export of security and technology from private Israeli companies that supply some of Israel's military equipment, surveillance equipment for things like the separation wall between Israel and the West Bank. The same companies are working with the U.S. to provide technology for things like bolstering surveillance and militarization along the U.S.-Mexico border. When we see private corporations benefiting from oppression, even through the discourse and language of security, that complicates the analysis a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, I think that should probably be at the center of the analysis. Because we often don't explicitly talk about capitalism and the reasons, why the political ties between the U.S. and Israel, for example, are so strong. What does that have to do with the development of global capitalism over the last decades? And, what does the prison industrial complex have to do with shoring up a capitalist system? That's oftentimes the elephant in the room. That's oftentimes that about which we do not speak, but it is central. It is absolutely central.
You have a very grand, radical freedom dream for dismantling capitalism, for abolishing policing in prisons, and for ending the occupation of Palestine. I mean, these are not short-term goals. These are not easy solutions that we're looking for here. And in all of those areas, we see progress and then we see retrenchment. We see 2 steps forward and then we see steps back, sometimes 1, sometimes 3. Given where we are right now on the question of Israel and Palestine, do you remain hopeful?
I don't think that I get to decide on that basis. Of course, there are moments when we feel extremely distressed. And this is, one of the tragic moments in our recent history. But I also should say that it takes time. It takes time. And oftentimes we are unable to see where we're headed. But we have to believe that it is possible to make change. And we can't give up. We can't give up. We can't not hope, because hope is the condition of all struggles.
We'll leave it there. Angela Davis, thank you so much for joining me on Upfront.
Thank you so much, Mark, again.